Welcome everyone to another series of our Global Employability Expert Series. My name is Mirta Aguirre. I'm the head of employability of virtual internships. And today we have a very interesting topic, and I'm sure you're gonna love it because we have a very diverse audience today, people from very different countries all over the world. So our session for today is intercultural skills to enhance your professional path. And for this very interesting and very important topic, we have Tatiana. Thanks, Tatiana, for being here today. And let's meet who our speaker is. So Tatiana is an Argentinian interculturalist. She will let us know what this exactly means. She holds a degree in communication science, and her work focuses on the intersection of communication, culture, and training for professional teams. She has been part of many different organizations, among which Global Shapers, Shaping Horizons, ASEC, an international consulting firm, and a startup. So she brings a lot of experience working in a diversity of different organizations in different countries as well. And she has also published 5 articles for the World Economic Forum, and she creates content on social media to reach for more audiences. So what we will do exactly in today's sessions? Well, we will dive into the complexity of intercultural communication and cultural intelligence to grow your career, catch more opportunities, improve your performance, and network successfully. So, without further ado, thank you, Tatiana, for being here today. I'm very excited to have you. And where are you connecting from today?
Hello, everyone. Well, I'm connecting from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I am from here. I was born here, so I could say I am Argentinian and I am in Argentina. I don't know if it's the same case for the audience. You already told us where you're connecting from, but I don't know if you were born there, if you're just traveling, or what are you doing there. It's really nice to meet you. Thank you, Mirta, for your great introduction and your kind words. And I will start sharing my screen if you all agree, and we can start talking about intercultural skills. And also I would love to get to know this audience. I can see it's really, really diverse. And that's something that I love, of course. That's what I do for my job and my professional life. So I am happy to be here with you and share everything. So let's share. Tell me if you can see the presentation.
Yes, I can.
Yes, cool. So we have a lot of things to discuss today. But before that, I just want to ask you a few questions. And if you want, you can just turn your microphone on, or you can just type it in the chat. And my first question is, what's your nationality? Or if you have more than one, I would love to know what's your nationality. Just in case you want to share it, you're welcome to do it in the chat. And something I would love to know as well is, how do you identify yourself from a cultural point of view? And this is a tricky question because usually we think that our nationality is a synonym of how we identify from a cultural point of view. But this can vary because maybe you are like Andre, who is just sharing. Thank you very much, Andre, for sharing. So yeah, we are close. Argentina is very, very close to Brazil, of course. So his nationality may be from Brazil, but maybe he identifies culturally with a specific culture inside of Brazil, because something good to know always is that each country doesn't have just one culture. All countries are diverse within each country. There are many communities. And also that maybe based on your background and your family history, maybe you identify with other cultures. For example, in my case, I am Argentinian, but all of my family, like 3 or 4 generations before me, they are from Spain, Italy, and France. So there are a lot of customs and maybe values and maybe the dishes my family prepares on Christmas or in any other, for example, birthday or family party, where we continue those traditions. So that's why I am just highlighting the difference between nationality and culture. And also something important is how to identify yourself, because just because you have one nationality doesn't say anything about your cultural background and how do you identify? Maybe because of your family background, or maybe because you lived abroad. Maybe you lived 10 years abroad. I know that Mirza has lived abroad many times to study and work. And that also, complements the culture from your home country. And that's when we start building our identity. The identity is not something fixed. It is something that is very dynamic, and it is always changing based on the things we live and the experiences we have. Well, I imagine that all of you identify their own cultural background and history with the country they were born, as you shared before, your hometowns. So something that I would like to know now is if you have ever heard about intercultural skills. Just let me know in the chat if it's yes, no, maybe something, but you don't know what it is exactly. Okay, so here we have Abraham. He says, they say, I am from South Africa and identify myself culturally. Okay, wow. This is interesting. You can see here in this comment from African year, which is basically has a Dutch and German history. Can you see this diversity in this identity? And it is not just, okay, I am from South Africa. We can see that people even from the same country have different identities and have different histories, of course. Okay, then we have, yes, we have someone that has heard of intercultural skills, and then someone that hasn't, and okay, someone else that hasn't. Okay, this is good. This is a good way to get started with it. Maybe in the past you have heard about the IQ. This is the intelligence quotient, emotional intelligence, and social intelligence. These terms are maybe more famous. We hear about this all the time on LinkedIn or Instagram, how important it is to develop emotional intelligence and all of that. And these things are well known, and they are important maybe for some people or for some, content creators or companies or whoever it is that is talking about professional development. But there is something else that people usually don't take into consideration, and that's cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence basically impacts on all the other intelligences. It impacts on the way you are going to interact with people from other cultures, and takes as a baseline your emotional intelligence, your social intelligence, and your IQ. For example, it is not the same to have a specific level of social intelligence with people from your same culture than with people from another culture. The values and the ways of acting will change, and that basically impacts on the original levels of social intelligence or emotional intelligence, let's say, that we already have. So we can talk about cultural intelligence, or you can find also this term called as cultural competence. If you Google it, you will find it in those ways. But I usually prefer to call it intercultural skills because I don't like the term intelligence or competence, but that's just a personal opinion. And that's why I usually talk about it as intercultural skills. And if you Google it, you will also find more information about it. But let's define this term. So cultural intelligence is the ability and competence to use all the human senses to converse, empathize, function, and transact effectively with those of another cultural background. This means that there is something that is key to understand, and this basically means that English is good to work internationally, to have friends from other countries, to even study maybe abroad, or to study an online degree or whatever it is good because you have the opportunity to interact with people from other countries that may not share the same mother tongue that you have. But the thing is that speaking English is not enough. We need other types of abilities to interact with people from other cultural backgrounds effectively. And this is where cultural intelligence and intercultural skills appear. There are a few myths that I see usually, on LinkedIn and Instagram about what people think that intercultural skills are. And I just want to share them with you and tell you why they are myths and how we can replace those ways of thinking about intercultural skills and how to approach them from a better standpoint. So, as I said, intercultural skills means that you have the skills you need to interact with people from other cultures. Just going, from a wider approach and not just, okay, the language, speaking English, okay. But what does it mean? People usually think that having intercultural skills means that you master the norms and values of every single culture of the world. Like basically, you have to know everything about the culture of the people that you are interacting with. This means that, for example, here, I would have to know everything about Nigeria and Brazil and the US and the UK. I would have to know every single detail about those cultures. And that is not that way. I mean, if you have cultural intelligence or if you develop intercultural skills, you don't have to know everything, every single detail about those cultures, not at all. You just have to know how to recognize and understand that the contextual differences between your culture and their culture is real. That's what you have to know, that your ways of working, your ways of thinking, your ways of communicating will be different from the abilities and ways of working, ways of communicating, and ways of acting than the other person. Yeah, this is something that I usually like to say because people think that you have to be like a Wikipedia, you have to know everything by heart about each culture, and it's not necessary at all. Another myth is that you must know every detail and touristic point of a country, like you have to know all the museums and the important landmarks of each country. And culture is not that. Culture is not a museum. Cultures are the values and the norms that each culture has, or each country or each community. So actually, you don't know, for example, if you interact with someone from Paris, you don't have to know where are the best museums or when is the best time to visit the Eiffel Tower. No, you have to know how to interact with them, just because they have a different way of communicating, interacting, making friends, and working than the ways you have. So these things are good to know because usually when I talk about intercultural skills, people just say, okay, but do I have to know everything about this culture? Do I have to know everything about the country? And no, you don't. You just have to be open enough to interact with them. And this is something that comes as a third point. It's like people think that you must live abroad to develop these skills, and this is not true. The only thing you need, apart from a good training like this one, or just reading books about it and reading articles or watching videos about it, apart from training yourself, the other thing you have to do is just to be open-minded about it and to be willing to question yourself. All the things you have learned in the past about each culture and about each country, you have to understand that it's important to question yourself, your own culture, and everything you have heard from other cultures. For example, maybe I have learned something about a specific culture just because I saw a movie and I read something on the newspaper, and maybe I have a lot of stereotypes in my mind because I have read a lot of things about one specific country, but maybe I don't know anything about it, like in person, because maybe I haven't gone to the country and maybe I don't know any local people from that country. So basically what I know is based on movies, it's based on the newspaper, it's based on what I see on Instagram. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's your job to be open-minded, to say, okay, these things are things that are online, and actually I cannot make any judgment about this culture because I haven't been there. I haven't met anyone from there. So that's when I have to say, okay, if I want to learn about this country or culture, I have to start interacting with these people and learning without any judgment or biases. And what I want to say about that, you don't need to live abroad to learn this, is because within the same country, as I said before, you have a lot of cultural diversity. There is no country that is monolithic, that has just one country, one culture. No, it can change based on the regions. It can change based on the religions you have in your own country, based on the different communities, the migrants that live in your own country. You can interact with other cultures even in your same city. So no, you don't have to have like 100 stamps on your passport to have cultural intelligence. And actually, I know a lot of people who have traveled the world and, they don't seem to have developed any intercultural skills in their experiences abroad, because you can see a lot of judgment and biases on the way they speak about other cultures. And that's why I encourage you to be always open-minded about it. And the fourth point that I wanted to highlight is that cultural intelligence is not about stereotypes. And this is usually a myth that it's all about stereotypes. And it's not. Actually, cultural intelligence is about approaching people from a different background, trying to understand the way they think, the way they act, and the way they communicate, but based on archetypes, not stereotypes, archetypes. And archetypes are norms, are values and characterizations about a culture that are always validated and approved by locals. And also, they are also backed up by scientific evidence. This means that there is always research where maybe the people that was carrying out that research, maybe they did interviews in big communities from that country, and maybe they organized focus groups to get insights about that culture. So it is always important to take into consideration that you have to base your cultural intelligence and intercultural skills in archetypes and not stereotypes. But we will see that later. What I want you to take here from this conversation, this is the slide that is the most important, is that you must always consider cultural intelligence in everything. If you want to make friends from other countries or cultures, just use cultural intelligence. If you want to work with people from different countries and cultures, just use your intercultural skills, because they affect everything. They affect the way you're going to work. They affect the way you're going to interact with people, how you're going to use humor. And this is something great, because a couple of months ago, I gave a speaking engagement for a company from Latin America. If you don't know, Argentina is a country that it's in Latin America. And this company had people from different countries within Latin America, and they all spoke Spanish. But there were a lot of differences in the use of humor. And this had a great impact on the way people would interact with each other, even with people, that were in higher levels, like managers and leaders of the organization, with the rest of the employees. So there, even if it's the same region, the same language, the use of humor would vary across countries and cultures. And that was a problem for them. And I helped them with my training. I helped them to manage the use of humor more effectively and, more consciously, of course. It also has an impact on how we communicate. As I said before, we usually think that speaking English is enough, like to have it on your checklist to work internationally. And you say, okay, I speak English. I have B2 or a C1 level, and that's enough. But actually, that's a starting point. From that moment, you have to invest your time in developing intercultural skills. Also, it has a big impact on the way you manage timelines, the way you provide or you get feedback. Maybe you get feedback from someone from a culture that is way too direct, and maybe you will have a cultural background where feedback is provided in an indirect way. So it can be challenging to get direct feedback if you're not used to that, and maybe you think that your leader or your boss is just angry with you, or they are not happy with your work, and actually maybe they are happy, but their way of communicating it is in a direct way. Maybe another example could be that there are cultures that usually provide feedback in group settings. This could be that they can say that you're doing a good or bad job with people in the same meeting, like here. And there are other cultures that would do the exact opposite thing. If they have to provide feedback, whether it's good or bad, they would do it individually in a one-on-one call. So you have to be open enough to say, okay, things are different and people from other cultures do things in a different way than the way I do it. And maybe that's not something bad, it's just different. And I have to learn how to navigate those differences. And just as the last point of this list is that this can also impact on the way you sell a product. For example, if you get a virtual internship in a sales role, maybe you have to sell a product to someone from another country, from another culture, and the way you are going to negotiate with them and the way you're going to tell them how valuable your product is will change across cultures. So that's why it's so important to know how to communicate effectively with each one of your audiences. Do you have any questions or any comments? You can just feel free to drop a message in the chat, and I have it here, so we can just take a moment to have a conversation. But now, yeah, I invite you to just share with me an answer about this. So I have a quick question for you, and it is if you talk to your family the same way you talk to your boss, like if maybe a family member tells you to do something and you don't want to do it, would you respond in the same way you would do it to your boss or your manager? I would like to know in the chat. Yes, no.
We have a question
Yeah, I
regarding
can
to
see
what
it.
you were saying, is how to actually figure it out in practice. Well, you're gonna let us know, I imagine.
Yeah, I can see also there is a no, of course. I am from India and I am currently in the UK for my master's. It is quite different culturally. I'm holding a small talk here. It's quite different. Cool. Thank you for that message. As you can see, this is real. This is not something we can say, okay, this is not important. This doesn't have any impact on my life. Yeah, it does. So I will answer this question. How do we actually figure it out in practice? Basically, you could just come across all the issues and blockers you will face. Like here, Shurya, just correct me if I didn't pronounce it well, is saying that they are actually there in the UK and just a small talk is different. So you will come across all of these issues and blockers and you will notice that things are not the same way you expected, which is okay. I mean, you are in a different culture and country, so that's okay. It's what is supposed to happen. So what you have to figure it out, and what I would say in practice is just take your time to observe. Like you are a sponge, so absorb the information. Try to see how people interact with each other. So in this case, Shreya is in the UK. Okay, what I would recommend is just be alert, just listen to the conversation. The small talk is different. Okay, how do people interact with each other? Is there too much body language or not at all? Do people use humor in a small talk or they don't? What do they do? What are the things? What are the topics? What are the things they bring up during the small talk? Is it necessary to have a small talk? Because some cultures don't even bother about it. Like they don't feel awkward at all needing a small talk. Maybe they just, if you're in the elevator, they say hello, or maybe they don't say hello at all, and they just go with it. They don't need a small talk. So what I would recommend is, apart from training yourself, reading about it, asking for tips and recommendations from locals and say, hey, I can see the small talk here is different. Can you help me? Can you give me any tips? Always ask a local. But even if you don't have anyone to ask, just observe, listen, take the environment as your own textbook and just see what's happening. So you can adapt yourself better, and you can also take the hints that will help you be included. That's in practice, because you can read a lot about each country and culture, but then it's you and your soul. They're trying to meet people. So just use those situations to be your field to understand what is going on and how to adapt yourself better. And as I said here, even if you are in the UK, interacting with people from your same age, maybe at a bar, will not be the same way you will interact with people in the UK at the office. So you know, it's not just about the culture, but how hierarchies work, how the conversations work, how the location where you are at. It is not the same, the workplace, than a bar or a disco or a restaurant or a museum. So always pay attention to what's happening and always ask. If you do it with respect, and that's something I have done many times living abroad, if you do it with respect and you say to the locals, hey, I am new here and I want to learn about this culture. I have been here for a while and I want to adapt. I want to be included. What are your tips? And if you want to ask something, say, hey, I'm here to learn and I want to learn. Can you explain this to me? I could Google it, but I respect more the locals' help that rather than Google, because I don't want to, you know, follow any biases. So can you help me with that? Can you give me any tips or recommendations? And if you do it with respect, it is always going to work.
Tatiana,
Always.
that's very useful because I always get confused when I'm meeting someone for the first time. So I don't know, in Argentina, we kiss a lot, like in France. In France, a little even
Yeah.
more, they give 2, even 3, 4 kisses. It's like insane. But in other cultures, of course, you don't kiss if you don't know the person. So, and in cultures like a little bit like in between, and like in the UK, like I was always unsure, like, shall I kiss someone or not? So I say this openly, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how should I say hello, you know, because sometimes it gets that uncomfortable moment where I'm like, shall I shake hands or one kiss, 2 kiss, shall I hug? So putting it like open, I don't really know how to behave here. I think it's honest and no one could get offended by that, right? Because it's not our culture.
Sorry, can you repeat the same part, the last part?
That
Your question?
I think people should always find this in a good way, that they couldn't get offended because we're learning. It's
Oh,
not a
yeah.
culture. So we're clearly saying, I'm sorry, I don't know how I'm supposed to do it. So thanks for actually teaching me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I have done this so many times. I mean, I will bring up an example later, but um, for sure, I mean, I lived a while in Norway while studying, and the culture is very different than Argentinian's culture. And I also lived with international students in the same building. So we were like all the continents in the same apartment. And these kind of things, as you said, Mirta, are key. I mean, there is no problem in asking. And I have a lot of things, even with the kissing. I made a friend there who's from Spain. And in Spain, they give 2 kisses, one in each cheek. And in Argentina, it's just one. And I remember that the first time I met him, he gave me 1 kiss, and then he tried to give me 2, because for him, that's normal. That's something you do when you meet someone. And I said, what are you doing? Like, he was getting closer to me. And for me, you know, that was new, and I wasn't expecting that. And then we start laughing, of course, because he said, don't you give 2 kisses in the cheeks? And I said, no, just one. And this is silly, of course. We just laughed, and it's just a funny thing. But this kind of things happen. And if you talk about it with respect and you say, okay, this is a fun fact, it's good to learn about it. And if someone can explain it to you, it's even better. And you're prepared for that, for sure.
For me, it happened the other way around. It was like most of a professional conversation, and I got a bit, I don't know, nervous. And then after I finished, I went and hugged the person, thank you. And the person gets like, oh, you're so sweet. Like, you do that in Argentina? And I was like, no, actually, I was so nervous that I got all confused. And those things happen. So it is good to say, oh, I'm sorry if it's like, those awkward situations can happen and will happen probably if we've all communicated with people from other countries. We may have this, and as you mentioned, Tatiana, I think like the really interesting insight I'm getting out of this webinar is like that's gonna happen, and it's okay to embrace it, and actually don't be open to this kind of blockers, like you mentioned, misunderstandings, with an open mind, right? Like, it's okay.
Yeah, as long as you do it with respect, That's always okay. And this is just for you. I want to take the pressure from you, because maybe you think, "Oh, I have to know everything about this culture. Oh no, I have to learn like 2 million things." And no, you don't. It's impossible. I don't even know everything about each culture of the world. It's impossible. So as long as you do it with respect, that's okay. And just as someone asked about how to do it in practice, I will give you another example. And Mirta can help me with this. In Argentina, and in any situation, but for example, if you go to the supermarket to buy some groceries and you want to pay to the cashier, maybe you say, "Hello, how are you?" And you just ask, "How are you?" Because we say it all the time. You say, "How are you?" to everyone, don't you, Mirta? I mean, do you agree with this?
Yes.
Hi, how are you? Maybe you don't even care, but it's
No,
like
you
a
don't
hello.
care.
But
Yes.
it's a synonym of hello, basically.
Yes.
And when I lived in Norway, when I went to the grocery store, I would say to the cashier in the beginning, like my first week, I would say, "Hello, how are you? These are the things I want to buy." And I remember that they would stop and look at me and say, "Oh, I'm fine. Thank you for asking." Like, like if I was their mother and I was like very worried about them.
Yeah,
And they
very
would take the
interested in
time.
knowing.
Yeah, and they would take the time and say, "Oh, and thank you very much, and having a great day. I really appreciate you taking the time to ask me how am I." And it was like, oh my God, like they took it too personal. And it seems that nobody asked them how they are, like on a daily basis. And then I asked a Norwegian friend, and they say, "No, we don't ask that. You just say hello, and that's it. And you don't ask people like how they are." So yeah, they will be surprised if you do, because they will think that you are just thinking about them and worried if they are okay, if they are having a nice day. And here it's the other way around. I mean, if someone asks you how are you, you don't even you would just say hello. You wouldn't say good, bad, or you will not start explaining your life.
No,
And that's something good.
That's funny because I had a French friend in Argentina. It happened the opposite. He's like, "Oh, people ask me how I'm doing, and when I start telling them, they don't pay attention." And I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
because we don't really want to know how you're doing. It's just the way like we have of starting a conversation. It's like just being polite. It's not because I really want to know. Of course, if you're friends, yes, but not and those kind of things are super, super funny.
Yeah, absolutely. And from that moment, I just stopped doing it, because I tried to adapt. So I observed, as I said before, I just acted as I would. I observed that it doesn't work the same way in Norway, and I just didn't do it anymore during the 6 months I stayed there. So you are like in a sponge, and you have to absorb all the information from the environment. You can read a book about it, but in practice, real life is what will count. Absolutely. So I have a few questions here. The small talk, yeah, always the weather. I think the weather is always a good topic to get started in any country, I think. I'm Spanish. I was used to kiss people, but after 5 years in the UK and the pandemic, I don't kiss anymore. I see it as a personal space invasion. Yeah. Well, when I lived in Norway, and it was during the pandemic, so we didn't have to kiss each other. But yeah, I just love it in Norway that you didn't have to kiss anyone, and it was so good, and I got used to that, and it was good with the COVID as well. Cool. And then we have another question. Did most people speak English in Norway? Was their language too hard? Well, I gotta say that I didn't study any Norwegian. That wasn't my goal, because, well, I want to study other things, not the language. So I used English the entire 6 months. And here it's what I'm trying to say. Of course, if I learned Norwegian, it could have been better for me to be included and to adapt to the culture. But well, I didn't have the time to focus on that. But English was good, was the way I could interact, and everybody speak English there, from the people at university to the cashier at the supermarket. I was in Oslo, which is the capital city, so maybe it makes sense for people to speak English, because they are used to getting tourists and people that go and study from abroad. But as you can see there, it was more important for me to adapt with cultural intelligence rather to speak Norwegian. So You can keep on leaving your questions. I will read them, but I will continue with this. As you said, the question to this, the answer to these questions is no. You don't interact the same way with your family, your boss, your colleagues, or your partner. So basically, this means that our expectations, values, ways of working and thinking will also change across cultures. It's the same thing. They will change. And I want you to imagine this impact, the impact that this has on big and culturally diverse teams. So for example, you can have a team of 3 people. You get a virtual internship in a company that has 3 people, and those 3 people are from 3 different cultures. Okay, it will be challenging, but it's only 3 cultures. Well, maybe you can get used to it and you can adapt. But then there are 4 people. So now you have 6 lines of interaction between each culture. And then you have 5 people. And then you have 10 lines of interaction. So you have someone from Argentina, Brazil, Turkey, the UK, the US, what else? Norway, Sweden. You have more and more people, and the lines of interaction and the differences across those cultures will have a big impact. And we're talking here of small companies. We're just talking about companies that have 3, 4, 5 people. Let's think about a company that have 14 people. There we have 91 lines of interaction. This means that you have, on a daily basis, 91 lines of having misunderstandings, having issues, and having blockers related to cultural differences. And still, 14 people is pretty a small number, you know. Usually big companies have thousands of employees. So I am here to say cultural differences are a thing, and you have to consider them when working with colleagues or interacting with local people. This is a slide where I am just sharing with you how you can identify a stereotype and an archetype. I already said it, that the stereotypes are created from external sources, maybe something you read on Instagram, maybe something you watched on a movie, something you read on the newspaper, but basically that's not validated by any local, and it's not validated by any research. And usually these things are negative. They use humor or violence against a culture. However, on the other hand, we have a cultural archetype, and this is always created from an internal source. For example, as Mirta and I said, Argentinians say hello, asking you, how are you? So that's, and we don't care actually if you're good or bad. I mean, if you're a friend or family member, yeah, we do care. But if you are someone from that we've come across on the street or a cashier at the supermarket, actually, we don't care. But we are validating this. We are saying that this is true. So yeah, this is an archetype. That's not a stereotype. And it's always something positive. Also, it's a celebration, or, you know, we're putting in value something that is true, and we say, okay, yeah, this is something that actually happens. And here I want to give you an example of something I heard when I went to Norway, that when I told my friends that I was going to Norway, they just said, hey, but you're not going to make any friends. They are so cold. It's impossible. Why are you going there? Why don't you go to Spain? That maybe they don't have so many cultural differences than, you know, comparing to ours. And that was cool because nobody from my friends have ever gone to Norway. And they were just speaking about Norwegians as if they knew something about them. And I used to ask them, where are you taking that from? And it's not, no, you know, I've heard about it. I've heard about that on social media, that it's hard to make friends in Norway, but I don't know any Norwegian. And that's a good moment to say, okay, this is a stereotype. And the way to approach this, thinking this from an archetype standpoint, is saying, okay, maybe it is not that it's hard to make friends with Norwegians. Maybe their communication style is different than mine, and they will make friends in a different way than the way I make friends in Argentina. And that's the challenge, that I do things differently than the way they do, but that doesn't mean that it's bad or that I will never make friends in Norway. And I actually made friends in Norway, and it wasn't hard, it was just different. And that's why I invite you to approach your intercultural encounters this way, you know, considering the archetypes and always learning from the values and norms that are approved by the locals. This is a chart where I just want to show you how, for example, leadership changes or varies across cultures. This is a model developed by Richard D. Lewis. And basically, he says, okay, we can start mapping out the cultural differences regarding leadership and how leaders manage their teams and companies. And here, we will not get into detail with each one of them. But here you can see, for example, if you are from a country that is from Asia or a Latin country or from the UK or the USA, and you work with people from the other culture, you would see that the way that people approach leadership or the expectations that everyone have about leadership will change. So maybe if you are from the US and you have a new boss and you expect your boss to act in a specific way, maybe it will change and it will not be as you expected, because maybe actually your boss is from Australia. And as you can see, the leadership style from the US is completely different to the Australian style. So this is for you to know that what you expect from your boss will vary across cultures, and that all the things that your boss expects from you are also going to change. So what I would recommend, if you have a boss from another country and another culture, just always ask them, what do they expect from you? About timelines, about the tasks you have to do, about the goals, how do they measure goals? Because maybe you think that you're being evaluated in a way that you are not evaluated that way at all. Maybe it's in a different way because they are from different cultures. And of course, you can tell them, hey, maybe your expectations about leading me are different, but I would also tell you what are my ways of working so we can just work together effectively and smoothly. There are other layers, and I know we only have 10 minutes left, but I want just to take the time to share with you other layers, like the way we communicate. I already talked about that, but we can also analyze this in the way we structure the rules of an organization. Maybe there are ways of approaching things in a universal and structured way, depending on a culture, and maybe another culture is way more flexible about something, or maybe a culture prioritizes individual work and other cultures prioritize collaborative work, you know, the teamwork. Maybe some people would prioritize their own career individually, and others would say, hey, I win if we all win. So this will change and vary across cultures. Also, the way we manage time, if we are more focused on short-term tasks or maybe long-term tasks, the motion, the way we communicate, the context, if it's direct or not, if explicit or not, the way we show our emotions. Latin Americans are usually known by the way they show their emotions. Maybe they are too happy, they just share it with people that maybe they are not so close to. And maybe people from other cultures would just share their emotions with their family and no one else, you know? So these things will change. And also, of course, the power distance, the way you manage the hierarchies, and that is related to leadership. How close are you to your boss? Maybe if you are from a culture that is really strict based on hierarchies, maybe the respect between one level and the other will be too high, whereas other cultures will prioritize, let's say, a horizontal interaction where a boss can interact with an employee and they can have a conversation in the same level, and both you know, the input from both parties are as valuable as the other one. And this is a spectrum that I want to share with you. As you can see, I am sharing how people work, and maybe it's like one thing or the other, and that's maybe how you think. For example, the teamwork, it's individual or collaborative. And people think that it's like a yes or no. Like this or that, but actually it's a spectrum. You don't have to be in one side or in the other. You can be like in the right side, maybe here, or you could be here, or you can be here. For example, if it's teamwork, maybe the US has a specific ways of working, like more individually, and maybe Norway in that case would be here. They are way more collaborative and everything is more egalitarian. So in that case, if we analyze teamwork, the US maybe is more in this side and Norway is more in this side. But they don't have to be like, this or that. It is not so strict. It can vary, and it has different grades, and it can be in different spots of the same line. The same thing happens with communication, power distance, and all of that. And that's why I have an example for you. Communication can be direct or not, can be explicit or implicit, can have low context and high context. Basically, low context means that the context can be important or no. The context means the tone of your voice, your body language, the way you are standing, the way you say things, eye contact. So the low context basically means the cultures that prioritize what you're saying verbally and not what you are also communicating in the context of the conversation. On the other hand, we have other cultures that prioritize the context. And that's, for example, Japan. It is not only about what you say, but also about how you say it and how you maintain the eye contact and how you move your body during that conversation. And as you can see, Brazil, for example, is usually validated as being in the middle, and it can depend on the situations. And as I showed you before, the leadership style, usually this is how science and the validation by locals validate the leadership style. Norway maybe is more egalitarian, and maybe in India, you have to respect the structure of how the organization is built. And maybe you are first, you have a junior person, and then you have an analyst, and then you have a consultant, and then you have a manager, and then a senior manager, and then the CEO, and you are supposed to respect that. You cannot, being a junior, you cannot talk to the CEO directly. Maybe you have to respect those levels of hierarchies. This is not strict because, of course, things vary not only to the culture you belong to or you are working at, but also to your personality, because maybe you are from Norway and your culture tends to be more egalitarian, but your personality is the exact opposite. Or maybe the culture of the company you're working at is completely different. So it is not just about this. This is just a model for you to take as a standpoint, but this will vary always based on the people you're interacting with. And the last thing that I want to say is that I encourage you to pay attention to all of these things in different moments and situations. For example, a job interview. The person that is interviewing you might be from a different culture. So it is not the same to do an interview with someone from the same culture rather than with someone from another culture. Team meetings, like it could be this training, but it could be a team meeting with your colleagues and your boss. The hierarchies and the ways you communicate will vary. Also, as I said before, a sales conversation, it will not be the same thing to pitch something to someone to the US or someone from Spain. It will change. As I said before, also the way you receive and get, and also the way you provide feedback and evaluation, it could be on an email, for example, it could be direct, it could be explicit, but it can be also the other way around. And finally, if you work across social media, if you create content, it would be the same thing. I mean, it's not the same to communicate something on social media for one country rather to another. The values and norms will be different. So you have to take into consideration your audience, always, 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 always. And as I said so many times, and this is just for you to take it, speaking English opens doors. I mean, we are here, we're having this training, but developing intercultural skills lets you cross them. So we are here, we are from different cultures, we are speaking English, we are understanding each other. But if we want to build relationships between all of us, we just have to take one more step and start developing our intercultural skills. And I think that's it. Now I want just to hear you and get to know your questions.
Amazing, Tatiana. That was super insightful. I really loved the analogy, right? The comparison. Yeah, learning English is essential. Being fluent in English is, of course, a requirement for today's global market. But if you really want to succeed in a global career or job, you need to cross that door. And for that, you need intercultural skills. So that's really amazing. And someone is asking, I think this is more of a career-oriented question. How come you came to do what you do? How come you specialized in communication, in culture, in your job? How did you end up doing this, right?
Well, first by going to university and studying for a lot of years. This field, my degrees in communications and culture. I know that in some countries this can change. I know that in the UK, usually this degree is called cultural studies. And then, of course, maybe you can specialize and take more courses about intercultural communication. But I can say that the way you apply your intercultural knowledge will vary across the people you want to help. For example, when I was at university and I studied communications and culture as a science, because I graduated as a social scientist at university. That basically means understanding how people, society, and culture works. But then I realized that I wanted to apply it for different people and helping different audiences. So when I was younger, a few years ago, I created a project where I started helping travelers, nomads, and migrants, to develop intercultural skills to adjust and adapt better to other cultures and the countries they were moving to. So I think, and now, well, I am working now. I am in another moment of my life, and I am working to help organizations and professionals. So I think that the journey basically is to learn, to study, always study, always. I mean, keep on reading, any paper, any new research, any new interview that is done by a group of researchers, and just try to help people. Even if it's about developing intercultural skills, it is not the same someone as you that are building your careers as someone that is moving to a new country. The challenges, the intercultural challenges that you face are always going to be different. So I think the key is studying, improving, studying, working, and just trying to help people when you work. I think that's the best part about the intercultural field. It's actually to help people feel better.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Would you like to share how we can stay in touch with you? Maybe we can connect through LinkedIn. We always encourage you to, first of all, have a LinkedIn profile. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile just yet, then go and please create one. And then take this opportunity to really start nurturing your network. Your host company supervisor is a great starting point. Your colleagues, people you know, and our speakers as well. So if you want to stay in touch with Tatiana, I think that's the next slide. We already shared that. Thank you.
Here it is.
You can always connect with Tatiana.
For sure. Yes. And that's something I would recommend. Something I have learned as an interculturalist or any other profession, just interact with people in LinkedIn. Just send a connect request, start conversations, and network. Networking will take you to other levels professionally. Yeah, so
exactly.
I'm happy to receive your DMs and your connect request, and let's start conversations about it if you're interested in this field.
And as we have the opportunity to do a virtual internship, to have global opportunities today, this is an amazing skill to have, intercultural communication. So what Tatiana shared with us today is super useful. Thank you, Tatiana, for your generosity and for sharing this with us. And thank you, everyone, for having come to our webinar today, for having taken the time. And that shows you're committed to your professional growth, and that's a great starting point. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, Tatiana, once again. And we will later on share this the link so you can go rewatch the webinar if you want to see it again. So thank you everyone once again, and have everyone a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye everyone.